Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Welcome, everyone, to this Community IT webinar, What are Cybersecurity Essentials for Nonprofits, with Matthew Eshleman, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT, and Ian Gottesman, who is the CEO of NGO ISAC. And they're going to discuss the basic practices that can block about 80%, at least 80% of attacks, and help you get your nonprofit on the right track to meet this moment. They're also going to talk about how to engage your staff with cybersecurity, so it isn't just something the IT team does, but something that everyone at your nonprofit sees themselves as a part of. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT. I'll be the moderator today. I'm very happy to hear from our cybersecurity experts. I'm particularly excited because both of these guys are great at breaking down this complicated jargon into components and concepts in ways that I can understand. And I'm not a cybersecurity techie, so if I can understand it, I'm sure all of us can too. We're going to learn a lot today. But first, I'm going to go over our learning objectives. So by the end of the session today, we hope that you will learn what practices go farthest to protect your organization now, learn to train against phishing, always perform your updates, and prioritize identity management, hear ideas on making cybersecurity more fun for everyone on staff, and discuss some lessons that we've learned this year and next steps. So Matt, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. It's good to be here. My name is Matthew Eshleman, and as I said, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. In my role, I'm really responsible for managing our back-end team that does all of the device and endpoint management for our over 200 clients. And I also work with our clients on cybersecurity strategy and implementation. So looking forward to talking with Ian today.
And Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Ian Gottesman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer on the NGO ISAC, and then I was a longtime IT leader at a series of nonprofits, which sort of led me to my current role where we help other nonprofits with cybersecurity.
Awesome. And before we begin, if anyone isn't familiar with Community IT, a little bit more about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support, and we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. Our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing this for over 20 years. In fact, our 25th year anniversary is coming up next year. We are technology experts. We are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we just received again in 2025. We always check the current list, but in the past, we've been the only MSP on the list serving nonprofits exclusively. I just want to remind everyone that for these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic. We only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. And we never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or benefit from that. We do consider ourselves a best of breed IT provider. So it's our job to know the landscape, the tools that are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, priorities, and budget. We got a lot of good questions at registration. We're going to try and answer as many of them as we can, but anything we can't get to, we're going to go over to our community on Reddit right after this webinar. It's r/nonprofit IT management, and we'll continue to answer questions over there. And we'll do that probably for the next couple of days as well. So if you don't have a chance to go right over there this afternoon, you can check us out tomorrow or the day after. And a little bit more about us. Our mission, as I said, is to create value for the nonprofit sector through well-managed IT. We also identified 4 key values as employee owners that define our company: trust, knowledge, service, and balance. We seek always to treat people with respect and fairness, to empower our staff, clients, and sector to understand and use technology effectively, to be helpful with our talents. And we recognize that the health of our communities is vital to our well-being and that work is only a part of our lives. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll for those of you in the audience. So our question is, are you the cybersecurity person at your organization? So your answers could be no, definitely not. That'd be me. I'm definitely not the cybersecurity person at our organization. You could answer yes, I am responsible for cyber. You could say, I have some responsibility for IT management, but I am not the tech or cyber person. Or there's another option of not applicable or other. And if you don't mind putting in chat what your role is, that would be great for us to see, if you feel comfortable sharing it. And Matt, can you see that?
Yeah, again, so it looks like we've got pretty even distribution here for about 20% say no, definitely not. 35% of folks here, yes, they are the own cyber at their organization, and then another 20% say we've got some responsibility, but not the owner. And a couple other people say, hey, no, not applicable. So
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
good distribution there. So hopefully something for everybody.
for everyone. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. If you are not the cyber person, don't worry. But thank you for coming here and wanting to get more educated on what the threats and the protection that you can put in place is. That's a great step to take. Some of the people have been putting in the webinar chat. They're a board member, level 1 IT support, director of IT, volunteer board member. So thank you for putting that in and welcome to the webinar. All right, and then we actually have another quick poll right away. Oops, I just closed my polls. Hold on a second. Okay. Didn't mean to close that. I meant to go back. Okay. So I'm going to launch this one. So this question is, what is your organization doing now about cybersecurity? And your options are hoping not to be a victim. We don't know what we are supposed to be doing. If that's you, there's no shame here. So please just let us know, and you've come to the right place. The second option is we're worried. We're taking some steps, but probably not enough. Also very, very common for nonprofits to fall in this bucket. So thank you for letting us know that. Another option 3, is we have good practices in place, but we can always do more. And that's something about cybersecurity that's kind of, a constant. Like, you could always do more. It's changing all the time. There's new stuff coming out, new stuff you can do. So, and then that last option again is not applicable or other.
So what is your organization doing about cybersecurity? The most common 2 answers were worried about it, taking some steps, but probably not enough. That was 41%, 17 out of 41. And then the second, or tied for that, is we have good practices in place, but can always do more. Again, 41%. And then for 12%, 5 respondents, was hoping not to be a victim. We don't know what we are supposed to be doing. And then 2 people said not applicable / other. So I think, that's a boat where we can all be. One of the things to think about with cybersecurity is it's a bit like health or wealth or a lot of other things that, like, you should do the bare minimum. It'll make a big difference, but you can always do more. You can always, eat more vegetables and be healthier or make more money. But if you can do enough to sort of do your day-to-day job and make sure that you can do your security, secure your information for your organization and your clients or users, whatever you want to call them, that is really where you should go and sort of do it a step at a time. It doesn't have to be this sort of great, big, unknown thing that causes you to just cower in fear and stick your head in the sand like a emu or whatever, ostrich.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah. I think doing something, like you said, taking a few steps, like maybe you aren't doing everything all at once. And so you feel like, oh, why should I even start? But it's definitely worth it to start. All right, so we're going to move on. And Matt, I think you wanted to talk about this graphic, which everyone can find in our playbook, which is a free download from our site. I'll post the link in the comments and it'll be in the transcript as well. But we use this graphic to talk about kind of our philosophy of cybersecurity. So Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as kind of building off what Ian said, right? There's always more you can do, and I think that's a good kind of metaphor to keep in mind, right? Security it's a journey. It's not a destination, right? You're never going to get to the place where you've got all the security, and so there's always more things that you can do. So I like this graphic. I mean, I wrote it or I developed it, but it really talks about the foundation of policy. That can be hard for organizations, but it is good to have kind of a common language set of instructions that just kind of talk about how do we think about IT at our organization. It can be in plain words, right? Like, what are we going to do about personal devices? How are we going to treat interns and volunteers? What's our password policy going to be? Where are we going to store our data? So just starting off with that foundation of policy helps make some of these other decisions a little bit easier. Building on that, we feel pretty strongly that engaging and training users is probably the best investment that you can make in terms of organizations that have limited resources to spend on IT. Just engaging staff, getting them trained, kind of showing them some of the basics, really does bear a lot of fruit. Once you get beyond kind of trained and engaged staff, then there are lots and lots of different technology tools that you can layer on top of this. I mean, it really can be a daunting process, but if you're working with a good partner, they will have some good solutions in each of these different areas. And then kind of at the very top, we have this layer that we call compliance. And what we find in working with the small to mid-sized nonprofits that we have, everybody wants to have a good foundation of IT policies. And we are seeing, more and more clients are getting into that realm where, because of their financial audit, they are now required to maybe do additional security practices. Maybe they were getting some government funding that required adherence to certain policies or kind of compliance framework. So, organizations typically aren't jumping, you know, both feet into kind of a full-on compliant framework at the beginning, but and maybe it's something that you do after you take care of some of these basics. So that's a way that we like to think about it and kind of build out those recommendations, and that's built into the cybersecurity playbook that we've provided.
Yeah, and I just shared that link, and it will be in the transcript too if you're listening to this later. So I wanted to move on, and this one I want to turn to you, Ian. So you had mentioned when we started talking about doing this webinar about covering the basics, and I think you said that if all nonprofits did these couple of things, they would immediately prevent up to 80% of attacks, which is a lot better than 0% of attacks. So as you and Matt talk about these basics that you pointed out for us, I wonder if you can also talk about the barriers to putting the basics in place for these different categories. So we know our nonprofits are worried about cybersecurity. All of you here today in the audience are worried about it. Once you know that you should be doing these things, it's also helpful, I think, to discuss why it can be hard to put them in place. So Ian, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, these sort of three, cybersecurity 1, 2, 3, or ABC, whatever you want to call it, are really the core, the foundations of all of the stuff you're doing. And whether you're using CIS controls or some other methodology to help you with that, like or Verizon breach reports, you can see that these things come up over and over again. And it can be hard, like even quote unquote the basics is not easy. Like, you know, making sure you have updates running on all your computers requires, for example, having an inventory of all your computers and phones that have your company's data on it. And that may include personal devices, right? A lot of us are in organizations where we provide our staff laptops and not phones, or maybe not even laptops. And so they're kind of intermingled work devices and personal devices with all kinds of data in there, but yet you have a responsibility to make sure your client or your users or whatever your data is secure. So you really have to kind of think about this and just start with simple things and start with baby steps. So, if you're a super small organization and trying, one person who's managing IT and HR and finance, which is not that unusual in a lot of nonprofits when they're starting out or just aren't big. How do you make sure that people are running updates? And it could just be as simple as setting up a meeting with them, whether it's in person or online, and making sure they've turned on automatic updates on their laptop and their phone so that they get the latest things automatically. Like I just had to install an update right before this call. And then anti-phishing training could be something as, you pay thousands of dollars for, or tens of thousands of dollars for, to train your staff, to do it asynchronously, or you have a trainer come in and do it. It could be as complicated as that. Or it could be as simple as like you have some reminders that you give people once a quarter or once a year, when people start. You have a document that you've created, or someone like Community IT or the NGO ISAC or whoever has created for you, that they go through a presentation. And and then, identity management is it's it's two words, but it's a lot. Like trying to make sure you have unique passwords and you're using multi-factor authentication or pass keys or physical keys. But there's a lot of different tools and places and ways that you can help you with these things. And you just start with the simpler version of it. You're not going to have single sign-on SSO if you're a small nonprofit right out the box. That maybe will add more security and physical keys from someone like YubiKey or passkeys, which is like using biometrics for your password for that second factor right out the box. But you can move towards it. You can make sure that you're all using a free or low cost password locker, for example. There's a lot of them out there that are free to use, or based on open source and free to use. And start with that, and then mature yourself up. You gotta kind of crawl before you walk or you run, and you gotta just not be intimidated and not start anywhere. And go from there. You can't, it's like the analogy we keep making with health and wealth or other things. You can't eat a field of broccoli on January 1st and then not eat vegetables any day for the rest of the year. You got to do a little at a time.
I love that. Speaking as someone who may have tried to eat a bunch of broccoli in January. We do have a question in the Q&A. What are CIS controls? And I wonder if while we're on this slide also, we could maybe talk a little bit more about like what is phishing? So what is anti-phishing training, and why identity management is important? Like what can happen if you don't have good identity management?
Identity management is just how you log into things. Increasingly, right, we're all sort of working in a remote cloud first world where we're like logging into things and we don't have complete control over our stuff. 30 years ago, when I started out in IT as a little intern in graduate school, my first day we walked in and we had like a meeting. I was in like an IT office at a state agency in Florida where I'm from. And they proudly got up and said, "We're the first agency in our division," or whatever it was. I forget the exact thing. That set up a firewall. And we have this very cool firewall called Eagle Raptor Firewall, which I still remember 30 years later because it has a very impressive name. It sounds like a cartoon. And all the bad stuff on the internet is kept outside with the firewall, and all the good stuff is inside. And as long as you work inside the firewall, everything is safe, and the firewall is going to guard us. And it's a firewall, and it's full of fire and walls, and it's an eagle, and it'll claw you up. And that was the analogy 30 years ago: is that the internet was bad, and everything outside was bad, and everything inside was good, kind of like an egg, And that's no longer true. Probably wasn't true then either. And that sort of increasingly now we're all using things in different ways, and very little of it is hosted inside like it was inside our firewall, like it was a million years ago when I was in grad school. And we're logging into those things. We're logging into Office 365 or Google or Salesforce or NetSuite or Intact or all these cloud-based tools that run our day-to-day operations. And then there's probably many more that I haven't thought of. And you have to make sure that when you log into those tools, that's giving the right person the right access, that you aren't somebody can't impersonate a staff member of yours and then, send a bunch of money to the wrong place, which is the most common form of fraud. Or use an account that's shared across a bunch of different people because it's easier to do that than set up individual accounts. You really have to kind of make some time and effort and design things correctly from the get-go so that you're doing kind of managing individual access to tools in a way that makes sense and that protects like the data of your staff, the data of the people you work for and with, and make sure that like you are kind of taking your responsibility, your duty of care for all the things that you're supposed to do. And then questions about what are CIS controls. So CIS is the Center for Internet Security. It's like a big nonprofit that helps set up standards for cybersecurity and internet security. And they've created these controls that you can use. I think there's 20 something that you can use to measure your security. And then you can like go and take a test and measure your controls, your standard, your organization's standard versus, say, other peer organizations or other types of organizations. And sometimes when you get like an IT audit, that's what they'll used to do at CSIS controls. And they have controls for things like identity management and updates and inventory that a lot of people use as a standard for cybersecurity and IT sort of maturity.
And is that cissecurity.org? Center
Believe
for
so.
Internet Security?
Yeah.
All right, I will put that in the chat and that'll be in the transcript too. So you can look it up yourself.
And they have a ton of different cybersecurity tools for nonprofits or for anyone, but they're a nonprofit and they have some pricing for nonprofits to do a bunch of different things in varying degrees of price and options. And
Awesome.
just a partner that we've worked with.
Matt, if I can turn it over to you just for a minute or two. We do a lot of anti-phishing training with our clients, and we find that very effective. So can you talk a little bit about what it is and how it works? Ian was saying, you can get really expensive, fancy ones. It can be as much as just like meeting together in the conference room and talking about what phishing is and how to be careful. Can you talk about like kind of our medium range of what we recommend people do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Ian said, right, you can do 20% of the work and get 80% of the protection. I really think that's true as it relates to email. As we support organizations, it's very apparent, right? I mean, almost all of the account compromises or like the wire fraud that we see, it all starts with a malicious email. And we would call that phishing, where, the sender of the message is obfuscated or the link that they're sending you, is obfuscated or has some, way that it's hiding its intent or its result. And so, the link that you thought you were clicking on to get access to the document from a partner, well, maybe that actually is, the partner maybe has a compromised account. And so now that attacker is sending you a link that's able to steal your credentials or access to your systems. And so now, you're kind of another victim. And so that being able to identify as an end user, like, is this message legitimate? Is it who I think it's supposed to be from? What should I do if I, click on something and it doesn't look quite right? Like, building all of that, expertise and knowledge is important. And again, so there's lots of free training resources out there. CIS has stuff. CISA, the government agency, has training resources that are free. And so if you have the time and can kind of organize those and point folks in the right direction to get to that stuff and make sure folks are taking it, that can be a good resource. We do a lot of managed security training, through a platform called Novafor. There's other online security training tools that are out there, but those tools are really helpful because you get a little bit more granularity in terms of, maybe which users are getting which training. You can kind of take it, it's an online learning management system, right? So people can take training whenever it's convenient for them. And then the other nice thing is you can do a little bit of testing. You can see which users maybe are more prone to clicking on those links that are going to come across, and maybe, which folks need some additional training resources to help them identify areas. And I think the other thing is, in terms of training, there's a whole bunch of different training content out there, and some people might like the, formal kind of stilted approach. It's very like, here's the detail and here's how a website link is constructed, and, here's, what the www means. And, one of the things about Know Before we like is that they have some really engaging, like mini series style content where, yeah, it's like a little like mini show, and they're just like dramatically representing like what happens when you click on that link. And I don't know, that's not the training for me, but we get like really great feedback when people take that. And I think if you can make training fun and engaging, educate people, give them the freedom to like ask questions, talk to other people, share their experience, I think that all works better. It's important, for these emails, right? It's good, right? When we send out those test phishing messages and we see, the result, like people are like, oh, is this phishing? Or somebody forwarded this to me, asked me to take another look at it. Yeah, that's great. That's what you want to do. Take a second look at it.
Yeah. We do have a question, Ian. Someone asked if there's a fee to join NGO ISAC.
Sure. We're a pay-what-you-can organization. We've been lucky to have some foundations help us with most of our operating costs, but based on your revenue, we have some guidelines. But if you want to join for free because you don't have the ability to pay right now, that's fine. You can just join through our website. Then I kind of want to join through our website, and we have a community online. We have weekly briefings, not honestly that dissimilar from this. And Matt has given one of those. We have an in-person conference. It's December 3rd in the Washington, D.C. at the Brookings Institute for Nonprofits.
Ian misspoke. It is actually December 4th. It's in Washington, D.C. at the Brookings Institution, and you can register on his website, ngoisac.org. That's ngoisac.org.
And we're sort of going from a totally volunteer-run organization where we were a year and a half ago to having staff and kind of moving up at providing more than just a community to help our sector protect itself. I wanted to kind of double-click on a couple of things Matt just said. One really good resource, which is run by another nonprofit, the Aspen Institute, is Take 9. It's a nice free online tool that is designed for sort of everybody to use to learn how to do some training. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you may have seen some of their public service announcements that they did around the holidays last year. They did some advertisements in the metro and on billboards and stuff. And then the most common type of internet fraud involves phishing. It's called BEC, business email compromise. That's basically where someone kind of gets in the middle of a conversation you're having with the vendor and misdirects funds. And it can be a small amount, like, I don't know, your printer vendor or your paper vendor, maybe a few hundred or a few $1,000s. Or it can be a really large amount, like it gets between you and a grant-making organization, and your annual grant of hundreds of thousands of dollars can be misdirected, and it can be quite scary. One thing I would like to say is the FBI is really, really successful at redirecting those funds. So if that happens to you or your organization, you're a victim of a crime. You should report that crime immediately, as soon as you possibly can, to the FBI, to the IC3 website. I think the IC3 stands for Internet Crime Communication, Internet Crime and something. But they have an 80% recovery rate if you can report it in 72 hours. So if you've realized you've had money stolen from you, like, immediately go there and report it. The person who did it may or may not be punished as a crime, because a lot of these things are happening outside the United States, and so we can't, our government, our law enforcement agencies can't do a lot, but they can work with SWIFT and other banking institutions to pull your money back. And so that's a really important thing, is you're a victim of a crime. You shouldn't be ashamed of what happens to you with something like BEC or any sort of cybercrime, honestly. And you should report it to local law enforcement in places like Washington, D.C. or Northern Virginia, Maryland, where I think most of us on this call, or at least the speakers on this call, are, or in the case of the U.S., or report to the FBI. They have large numbers of people dealing with cybersecurity and cybercrime, and they can help you recover money, get more information to you. They may come back to you with questions if they have them, but it's really important that, like, cyber crime is dealt with as it would be a real analogous crime, like in physical crime. Like if someone were to drive through the front door of your organization, a big truck, run up the stairs, rifle through your finance office's files, steal all the finance files that they're interested, run back down, and then drive out in an office in, say, DuPont Circle, or where I used to work, or any number of places in downtown Washington. That'd be on the front page of every newspaper, right? It's so crazy. But if they do the analogous thing of, like, break into your file server and rifle through your CFO's files, somehow that's okay, and that's not nearly as bad, and that's the CFO's fault because they didn't have a right password or didn't do security as well as they could have. I don't think that's true. I think that crime is just as serious if it happens in the cyber world as in the real world, and it should be reported to law enforcement and dealt with as a crime, and you're a victim just like anything else. And I think that's something that people kind of forget.
Yeah, thank you for that analogy. Like, it's definitely, I think also we always say, like, don't be so embarrassed or ashamed that you try to fix it yourself. Like, that's a criminal on the other end of what happened to you, and you don't want to be trying to go after them. So I do want to move on to this slide about protecting nonprofits, talking about risk assessment and some more basics. But I noticed that neither one of you really addressed, like, how can you get going on this, if there are some barriers at your nonprofit that are preventing you from taking these steps. So I'm actually going to turn it out to the audience. While we're discussing this slide, if you want to put in chat, if you've encountered barriers at your organization that are keeping you from getting going, please go ahead and put those in chat, and we'll ask Matt and Ian for their thoughts on that. But I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit. I think, Matt, this was one of your topics you wanted to talk about. I know a lot of cybersecurity companies use fear to sell their services, and there's a lot of anxiety in the nonprofit sector now. So can you guide our listeners as to how they can think through risks, do realistic risk assessment now?
I think, in general, like cybersecurity is kind of a fear-driven kind of sales model. Like that's how a lot of vendors come about it. Maybe for your organization, that is the only thing that gets people out of their complacency and will make them take those steps. I think every organization is a little bit different. I think if you're in the role, maybe cybersecurity is not your responsibility, but you have some involvement. I think understanding what levers to pull at your organization to move things forward is helpful. Maybe it's that cyber liability insurance application. That's a good way to say, hey, like we have this application, they're asking for all these controls, like we're not doing any of these, like let's pick one or two that we just need to get started. And then you can build momentum, right? You don't have to eat the field of broccoli in a day, but take a bite, right? Take one step. Maybe you're gonna enable maybe you're going to enable MFA. Maybe you're going to sign up for a security awareness training. Maybe you're going to use a free training, right? Just to get started. And then once you see that successful, you can move on to the next thing. I would say the other thing that's important to understand is just from the risk perspective. What does your organization's risk profile look like? What's your biggest threat? How likely is that going to happen? And what protections do you have in place to help mitigate against that risk? So I think, just generally, like being an organization with online resources, right? The biggest risk most organizations have is cybercrime that's perpetrated through fraudulent email that targets your finances, right? So that's a very common, if you're a one-person organization to like a 200-person organization, like that's the most likely thing that you're going to experience. Maybe organizations that work in policy, right? Maybe they have a little bit of a different threat profile, maybe, but that's the most likely thing that's going to happen. And so, just take a step back. What are you concerned about as an organization? How can you put in protections to help address those most likely scenarios so that you can, address that and then move on to the next thing?
We're getting lots of great suggestions in the chat around barriers. So I will include some of these in the transcript, anonymized. I'm not going to say what you said your barrier was, but they're really helping think through some of these barriers. And so we'll also, we don't have a chance to talk about all of them because we only have an hour. I'll get Matt and Ian to give me some thoughts as well on that, and I'll put them in the transcript too. So look back for that.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.